Thank you. This little routine is kind of by request for the guys in the band and musicians all over the world and people who remember with great love, I guess, one of the greatest eras that ever existed in all the entertainment business. And that era I speak of was the era of the big bands. We'd like to go back to that era and remind you a little bit of what it was like. Now, for those of us who can remember it, I guess the great romance was founded in the personality of the leader. The leader of every band in those days was two things. He was always the worst musician, and he was always the fourth trumpet player. Now, some people might ask, well, how did he get to be the leader? Well, it's simple. He owned all the music stands, which bore his initials. He owned a green corduroy coat with a maroon tie, and he had a 46 DeSoto with a rack on top. I would like to take you back to that great era and show you exactly. Now imagine you're seeing the entire band, whole big band is set up before you, but through the medium of kind of a hypothetical isolated camera, you're just watching the fourth trumpet player. In every band, in every city, this guy always looked exactly like this.
Okay, first of all, I don't play fourth trumpet. Second, I don't have a green corduroy jacket and a maroon tie, although I kind of wish I did. They didn't even make DeSotos when I was born. And I am not the worst musician in the band, if you ask me. And you know what? I don't ever make mistakes and have anything that I say or do on the bandstand that anyone can point to that defines me as a band leader. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Welcome to the BigBandology podcast. I'm Eric Dregney, and this is part 13 and the final episode in the Building the Big Band series. In the big band era, the band leader was the featured soloist or the person up front. Not only did they define the sound of the band with the way they played and the music they performed, it gave the band an identity, someone people could associate the music with. Bassist, composer, arranger Kris Berg is a band leader. He runs multiple large groups and has a true passion for the music. He joins me this week to talk about his band leading experiences, establishing a goal or path for a group, and the importance of knowing your role as a band leader, musical director, or both. All that coming up. I'm going to give you a list of names. This is going to take a minute. You ready? Here we go. Edward Kennedy Duke Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, Jimmy Lunsford, William Count Basie, Paul Whiteman, Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, Woody Herman, Stan Kenton, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, Toshiko Akiyoshi, Buddy Rich, Bob Mintzer, Sherry Miracle, Tommy Igoe, Marie Schneider, Tim Davies, Tom Kubis, Gil Evans, Gordon Goodwin, Kris Berg, Darcy James Argue, Pablo Gil, Tony Sukar, Eric Dregney, Dan Angotti, Andrew Wigurski, Dennis Reynolds, Doug James, Corey Powell, Terry Kitchen, Mike Doyle, Frank Margita, Paul Ferguson, Ernie Krivda, Jim Weiss, Dan Zola. Who are all those people, and why did I include such a long list of names? Because no matter what path of life they came from or started on, they will share one thing in common for the rest of their lives. They're all big band leaders. Many of them you're familiar with. Some I can guarantee you've never heard of. That's okay. Now that you've heard the names, go out and look up who they are and what they're doing. All of those people and so many others have stood in front of or sat in a group that they were the decision makers for. They put the musicians together or keep them together. They choose the music. They do all the extra things that sidemen don't have to or want to do. They get there early, they stay late. They deal with the money, the music, the personalities. They do it all, and it's a heck of a lot of work. I believe that one of the most important jobs for any band leader is to make sure that the band they are leading presents itself well every time it performs. Now, what does that mean? It's how the band plays, what the band plays, how they act, how they dress, and how they react to the expectations on a gig. As a band leader, I need to make sure that if I book a swing dance gig, that we play the appropriate music for that gig. Meandering around playing Derek Small's masterpiece Jazz Odyssey would not be appropriate for a crowd that wants to dance. At the same point, if the audience is expecting to hear a concert of compositions by certain writers, the band better play that music. A successful band leader also has to keep something in mind constantly that's very important. Dealing with relationships is the most difficult part of the job. This is not limited to people. This could be the venue you're booked at, load-in, timing restrictions, expectations of the venue coordinators. It could be the client expectations, how the equipment setup and teardown goes, the set list that you spent way too much time on to make just right. We haven't even gotten to the band members yet. Guys like Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, and Buddy Rich were notoriously tough band leaders. They knew that the BG or TD or BR on the front of that bass drum head was related to them and no one else. They were held accountable for the quality of the band, and if that quality level was compromised, they knew it could lead to less work and a tarnished band reputation. If the band played poorly on a gig, people weren't talking about the band's solos by the trumpet player or how it felt like the rhythm section guys were fighting each other with tempos all night. The comment would be, "Man, Buddy's band or Woody's band sounded terrible tonight." A band leader knows the music as well as or better than anyone else in the band. It's even better if they can assimilate a chart they are unfamiliar with quickly. There has to be a certain amount of respect and understanding that the band leader has the knowledge needed for the music being performed. If the drummer is playing a groove incorrectly, the band leader needs to point that out and fix it. If the horns are sloppy and not following lead players, that needs to be fixed. If the band leader thinks a tune should be one tempo but the bass player thinks it should be something else, there needs to be a conversation about that. Band leaders work hard to make it look easy. Sometimes they'll recruit people to help with setup and teardown. There are conversations to be had with everyone from clients and club owners to regular band members and subs. The magic is when it all goes right, which it rarely ever does, but nobody notices the things that don't. My wife Liz will tell you that I agonize over set lists for the Monday nights when the Sketch Anderson Orchestra plays. I could just repeat the same set lists every week, but to me, every performance is a new experience. Even if it's shuffling tunes around, I want to try and create a specific once-in-a-lifetime experience for the band and the audience. Something else a good band leader realizes is accountability. It's on you, and how you deal with that forms your personality as a leader. Now that accountability can be stressful. My wife will also tell you that I am nervous about every gig I'm the leader of. It's not always a bad thing, it keeps you somewhat focused while being pulled in different directions. When do I stop being nervous? When I'm either sitting in my chair or in front of the band, everyone's ready to go, and I'm counting off the first tune. No matter what happens before that, it can all disappear once the music starts. Band leading is a crazy thing. Mike Camiff and I started our very first big band, and I believe was the summer of either 1984 or 85. We went to different high schools and had plenty of people we could recruit for the band. We'd started buying big band charts. We'd been listening to a lot of stuff for years, and we just loved the music. We played a few public gigs and even did a wedding that summer. That was all it took. We were band leaders. Sometimes, becoming a band leader happens out of necessity. You're in a band and the leader decides to not do it anymore and fold the group. You feel you have enough comfort and experience to take over the leadership role, so you start your own band, or, if given the blessing, continue on with the band you were the member of. Sometimes it's something that grows out of another idea. Speaking with the legendary Cleveland, Ohio band leader Dan Zola, when his band started, the idea was to just do a reading band. That involved bringing a stack of charts to a rehearsal hall and just playing for a few hours and then being done. That regular plan to get together turned into a working organization that is still going after almost 60 years. Some band leaders are writers, and they know the best way to get their material played is to put a group together to play it. It allows a musician to have full control over what the group does and plays. That may be the goal, occasional concerts to play new material. That works just fine. The point is, there's not one story or answer that makes you qualified to be a band leader. A lot of times it creeps up on you and then bam, there you are. Now, if there's a book out there that can provide you the specifics to what is required to be a band leader, I'm not aware of it. I would imagine most band leaders write their own book for how they want to do it. Honestly, the book is in the stories of all the band leaders out there and how they've dealt with their experiences over the years. I try to pick up little things on every gig I'm not leading just to see if I can add it to my approach to make it better, because you got to keep growing and learning. Now, while researching this topic, I did find an interesting description from the Berklee College of Music website regarding the description and qualifications for a band leader. Do a search on how to lead a big band and scroll through the links. That's an education in itself. I just want to throw in one other thing. Just remember that this is my experience as a band leader. It's not right or wrong. It's just what I've lived and learned through the past 35 plus years of doing this. We all have very different stories to tell. In fact, I think it's time I hand this over to someone I've learned a lot from over the past few years about this topic. So this week, I am speaking with my very good friend and band leader, composer, arranger, bassist, and probably 5 other things I could throw on the front of them. And that is Kris Berg. How are you doing, Kris?
I'm doing good. Don't forget all around good guy.
Well, yeah, of course. That goes without saying. So we're talking about band leading, which I know we both do, and we both do way too much of it, more than I'm sure people realize. My first question for you is, what was the first band you got the chance to direct?
The first big band would have been doing my master's degree at North Texas. I spent 2 years I spent 4 years as a graduate TA, 2 years as an arranging TA, and before that, 2 years as a lab band teaching assistant, which meant I directed lab bands. They have 9 lab bands at the University of North Texas at the time I was there. And only the top 2 bands were being directed by full-time professors. So bands 3 through 9 were all being directed by graduate students. And then they also had, at that time, 4 reading bands that met and never performed. They just focused on building everybody's sight reading. So actually you had TAs directing those. And actually the first year I did my TA as a lab band director, I actually directed one of the reading bands, which meant getting really familiar with a whole lot of literature, because if you're reading, you're not really working on the literature. You're just bringing new stuff in for 4 rehearsals a week so that people can sight read. And then the next year I directed one of the performing bands. So that was my first experience directing big bands.
Wow, nice. So what was your inspiration for getting into big band music? When was maybe the first recording, one of the first recordings that you heard were like, man, I love this music and I want to be involved in it?
I can't remember the exact first one, but I'm going to guess that it was either some of the maybe less popular of the Maynard Ferguson stuff. I say less popular as in things like Gonna Fly Now and The Fly and stuff like that. I know a lot of purists are like, oh, I can't believe he did that.
Right.
But, as a kid who was listening to a lot of rock and roll and stuff, that was great. And then our band director in high school and our junior high band director in high school in Missouri were huge Stan Kenton fans.
Oh, nice.
And we actually had Kenton had played at our high school twice during my tenure. And so getting to see that band live. And then we had a jazz festival. We worked with a lot of great jazz band clinicians, everybody from Bud Brisbois to Jim Linehan to John Park. I mean, just a bunch of great players, and a lot of those were folks connected with the Kenton band, just because we had that connection. John Von Olen was the drummer you're aware with. John came down. Every year I was involved with our jazz festival, it was John Von Olen, the Baron. So
that's right, the Baron.
That's right. He was great to work with. But so I think the big impetus for me, or the big start for me, is just the fact that we had such a strong large band program at my high school with 2 really strong bands. We held a jazz festival that would attract 50 to 60 bands every year on one Saturday. Friday and Saturday, 2 sites going, and the chance to get to play and be involved in all that really got me going in that direction.
After you got the chance to run bands or be involved and be up front, when did you officially feel like, hey, I'm a band leader?
Well, a couple things. During college, I mean, obviously I had the TA experience, but I also had I've always been really inspired to write,
Right. I know.
Now thank you. The big band stuff didn't really come to maturity until later, but I had a long running fusion group doing not as commercial as some of the fusion groups in the 80s, but certainly on that slant. And I wrote a lot of stuff for that. And I was co-band leader of that with my roommate, who was the sax player. And so there was a lot of learning about communicating with band members and keeping them motivated and so forth, keeping the music at a level that still attracts them, that kind of stuff. But I think an interesting experience that kind of woke me up. We started at the college. I taught 25 years. At the college, we started a jazz camp, and we started the jazz camp the first 4 years. We ran it in conjunction with a gentleman who leads jazz camps in multiple places. And so he was the band leader. I was the guy running the camp, the administrator. I got to play some. But he was the gentleman that was actually fronting the band. And then business-wise, things kind of fell out between him and the college. And they came to me and said, you got two choices. You know, you can either not have a jazz camp, or you can have a jazz camp, big band jazz camp, and you have to run it. Those are your two choices, because we won't be doing the jazz camp anymore the way we've been doing it the last 4 years. So I decided, okay, I'm going to do it on my own, because I saw what benefits it was for the local programs, you know, to get their high school kids into a week specifically designed to teach the kids how to be better in a big band. And so that first year, you know, I got a bunch of folks that I knew, and one of the most notable was a great lead trumpet player, Jay Saunders.
Oh, yeah.
And so Jay was my lead trumpet player. And I think Jay made me really feel like a band leader one evening when I had called up Nutville.
Oh, yeah.
That's Greg Hopkins, right? Nutville. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So I called up Nutville, and we rehearsed it. And the way the jazz camp went is we would always rehearse Thursday afternoon. And then we'd rehearse every afternoon, and then we'd perform every night. So not a lot of rehearsal time. So we rehearsed Nutville, and Jay is clearly not happy. And what I learned from Jay is that if I ever want to play a chart like Nutville, I need to tell the band on Monday that Thursday we're going to play Nutville, so please take a look at it.
Right.
Instead, I just called it up at rehearsal. And I could tell he was upset, so I was like, Jay, what's the problem, man? Anything I can do? Because this is my first time leading this, and a lot of these guys are actually folks I looked up to. They're older than me. They have a much bigger history of playing with some of the great bands like Jay with Kenton and stuff like that. And he says, well, it's this damn chart in Nutville. The only reason it ever sounded good in Woody's band is because we played it every night. That trumpet soli thing, that's just terrible. And I said, man, I'm really sorry. He goes, well, what do you care? You just sit over there and go boom, 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 boom. And man, I felt about 2 inches tall.
Yeah.
And we ironed everything out, but I really felt like a band leader that afternoon when I got shouted down by my lead trumpet. And he, you know, afterwards, like I said, we talked about it, and that's when he said, you know, and I learned a lot, you know, if I want to do something hard, I need to let everybody know ahead of time, hey, we're going to do this chart, you know, so please be prepared, you know, and then it's on them. It's not on me for calling it up, you know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I know that even for Mondays, the guys in the band will tell you, especially since you got the chance to work with us with some of the things that we did with you, I'll bring stuff in on Monday and we'll read it. But every now and then I wind up sending out a text message like the week before, or like the day that I figure out maybe it's a Tuesday or Wednesday after we play, and be like, hey, we're going to try this week. Well, make sure you at least listen to it or take a look at it and kind of throw that out. And that's the nice, then I guess they know I'm serious, you know, instead of just like, oh yeah, we're going to read whatever. So,
well, and that process has worked out very well for me with Metroplexity, you know, which was designed to be a studio rehearsal band. And I send everybody the music ahead of time before we get into the session. And they're all expected to have their music down individually. So that the only thing we have to do in the studio is then put it together, because I designed the band to record in the studio, but not ever have to get together and do multiple rehearsals before we record. And everybody takes that responsibility. So that, you know, that thing I learned from Jay kind of paid off, you know, if you try to tie it in together.
You run multiple bands and being involved with big groups of people and all of their personalities and all the music. One of the mornings at the Jazz Educators Conference, you were running the Texas Instruments Band.
Right.
Talk about the Metroplexity Band. That's kind of I know that's your baby, and how that all came about.
Multiple years ago, almost 10 now, at our jazz camp, we had John Clayton's brother, Jeff, wonderful alto player. And he was our guest. And he and I were talking about the difference in John's publishing and my publishing in the big band world. And my publishing is, you know, kind of like I have the editors who say, hey, we need to chart this level, this style, or here's a tune, you know, here's a famous jazz tune or a great American standard or whatever, do an arrangement, level 2, grade 2, that kind of thing. And then John is in a position as a writer where John writes whatever he wants, and his publisher says, ooh, we'll take this one, and this one.
Right.
So Jeff and I got in this long conversation about how decades ago, John and Jeff said, you know, we need to start doing recordings. And they just started figuring out a way of putting it together and doing recordings. So his challenge to me was, you need to start doing big band recordings of your writing, and you need to just find a way to do it. So I started formulating a process, and basically the idea that I came up with, and your band is wonderful, and you've got this great running tradition, Monday nights, that kind of thing. I love the band. I enjoy it so much, enjoy coming up and playing with them, and hanging with the guys and everything. And we have a bunch of those in Dallas, and so many of the wonderful players in Dallas are already involved in more than one of those.
Sure.
So I didn't want to start a third or a fourth or a fifth one of those and stress out everybody's weekly schedule even more. So what I proposed to a bunch of the folks, and really it's the folks that were doing jazz camp with me as my faculty band that became the beginning of Metroplexity. I just proposed that we would put together a studio rehearsal band. And once or twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, I would send them 2 or 3 charts. Everybody would look at it for a week or 2, get their parts down, and then we get together in the studio and we record everything down. And then I take it from there with the engineer, and we do what we have to do to make it sound right. So it really became, it started out strictly as a recording project to make albums. And everybody just absolutely dug it. The chance to be part of something high end, we hooked on with a record label. And then out of that grew the opportunity to go and do some performances at festivals. We've been to Wyoming and, of course, the Gen Conference a couple of times, and Oklahoma and South Carolina, just different jazz festivals where the person running it really digs the band and says, man, I really want to get you guys to come up. And we've worked it out so the band got to go do some cool stuff. And that's, kind of where the band still is today. We're still recording for, we've got everything on the hard drive for album number 3, and we're about halfway through album number 4. The finishing up album number 3 has come to a COVID halt here at the moment, but we'll get it there,
Sure. Talking about recording, trying to navigate the world as it is right now. So not having the chance to have the entire band in a room to record, doing one at a time has been an interesting process.
Yeah, but I would tell you, just have patience and do it excellent instead of doing it hurried.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Very important, especially if we want to get good things out there for people to hear.
My arranging teacher once used to, I would bring others of us and I would bring him in demos and stuff. And one of his first comments when we bring something in that we were planning on other people hearing is he would listen to that and go, are you really proud of that and really comfortable with anybody who might hear that? And if your answer had any hesitation, he'd be like, then do it again. Because you don't put anything out there that is less than you're absolutely proud of, because you never know who's going to hear it. And if it's not your absolute best work, that may be their first and not so good impression of you.
What would you say the difference is between being a band leader and a musical director, or the combination? Obviously, in our case, we're both.
Right.
Kind of like the definitions of what each of those are for those who are wondering.
One of the differences I see is I work with a band over the last few years. We did one album with a band out of St. Louis called the Gospel Train Big Band, run by Dr. Tom Walker, who's a trombone player, was a longtime professor, ran the jazz program at Oklahoma State University, had wonderful trombone player, went to both North Texas for 1 degree and University of Northern Colorado for another degree. He's had this Gospel Train Big Band for a long time, and I'm his musical director. Both jobs involve making sure that the music is as good as it can be. But the difference is, a big difference to me as a musical director is I have to try to be aware of the vision of the sound that the band leader wants. Does that make sense? Because I have a sound that I want in a big band, and he has a different sound that he wants in a big band.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And what I have to do as a musical director is to try not to impart my musical desires on his band. I don't need to make Gospel Train Big Band sound like Metroplexity.
Right.
I need to make the Gospel Train Big Band sound like the Gospel Train Big Band as he wants it to sound. And so that to me is a really big difference. When I come and work with all state, all region, all district, whatever type bands and stuff, I still get to impart, this is what Kris Berg likes a big band to sound like, you know.
Right.
I like louder drums than a lot of folks like. Tom doesn't. He doesn't want the drums to be that loud. You know, I like a lot of trumpets. I like the band to have a huge full sound, almost punishing sound at certain times. Tom's a slightly older gent than I am, and so he grew up listening to Basie and things like that, and I grew up listening to Kenton and Maynard.
Right.
And, you know, so those bands are very different. So he and I have different ideas of what we want a big band to sound like. So when I'm leading, I get to do what I want. When I'm musical directing, I get to do what they want. You know, but it's still making sure the music sounds excellent.
That's been another interesting part of trying to get together, and like you have with your recordings, is trying to find that sound of your group,
Right?
Whether it be more of the big band era sound or something that's more modern or emulating different bands, or like in your case where you write all of your stuff so you get to sound totally like no other band, because obviously bands are playing your things, but when you get to run the ship and really you obviously you have intimate knowledge of every note that you write,
Right.
that you know exactly how it sounds, which is, you know.
Well, and like, you know, for example, in my band, the saxes have learned I don't like vibrato. I don't want to hear the lead alto playing bassy influenced vibrato ever. And it was really, I don't want to say heartwarming, but it was really cool for me in one session where we had a sub player. And at one point, I heard the lead alto lean over and go, "Hey, dude, he hates vibrato." And I was like, yes, we're starting to get, you know, like what Kris wants. Yes, that's great, you know. But they just understand, you know, as a player, I tend to play maybe too much sometimes, but I tend to play on top of the beat.
Right.
I like that energy, and everybody knows it. That's just part of what it's going to sound like as long as I continue to play in the band that I direct also.
At this point, give everybody all of your info so they can follow up with you.
Well, the most exciting thing for me right now is that I've been able to, you know, I've been writing for Warner Brothers / Alfred for 2 decades or more. But here lately, I've been able to sign on with some other publishers that I'm really excited about being with. I'm going into my 3rd year with Kendor and my 2nd year with Barnhouse.
Oh, great.
I'm really excited about the fact that I wrote the 2021 All-State for Illinois, their chart they use.
I just listened to that last night, actually. The S is silent.
That'd be a good one for you guys.
Yeah.
The S is silent. Well, I grew up in Missouri, and you know, one of the things in Missouri is Missouri or Missouri.
Right.
Or it's Missouri anyway. And then in Illinois, is it Illinois or is it Illinois? Well, no, the S is silent, so that's where my title came from.
Yeah.
And that was a challenging chart to write. In fact, I like that chart so much that will be on Metroplexity album number 4.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, I really did like the chart a lot. The way it turned out, and it fits in my head. It could easily fit in what I want Metroplexity to sound like, which a lot of times that doesn't necessarily happen. I write something for someone else, and it's like, man, that's a really nice chart, but I don't think I'll ever record that for myself, just because it's not the way I think it fits, you know.
Sure.
Of course, they can, you know, the website is krisbergjazz.com. Kris Berg Jazz on Facebook. Happy to be friends with anybody. You can email me, Kris at krisbergjazz.com. Just remember that Kris is spelled Kris. Otherwise, you won't find me. I want to make sure everybody knows, get in touch. You know, if you've got a question, they can email me. I'm happy to talk questions. I have students that email me questions about writing or arranging, or why did you do this on this tune or whatever. I love doing commissions for people. Work with the bands whenever we get back to working with bands.
Right.
But I really feel like it's, since I've retired from full-time college teaching, that going out and working with groups and working with directors is really what I'm supposed to be doing. So
I would agree.
Anybody who wants to get in touch with me, please just do it. Don't be like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to bother him. It's not a bother.
Yeah.
You know?
Great, man. Well, good. I'm sure we will catch up again about some writing and some charts and so forth, because there's always so much to talk about when we're talking about big bands.
Absolutely.
We'll do this again. But thanks so much for the time, and we will catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Eric. God bless, man.
Thanks. You too. Now, usually I just roll into the music and close out the episode, but I wanted to say a couple words. The concept of building the big band has been alive in my head for close to 20 years. I can honestly say that without this time that we're all working through, this may not have ever happened. Out of the bad always comes good. You just have to make sure you're looking for it. If you've not gotten the chance to check out all the different pieces of the series, I'd really appreciate it if you would, and then let me know what you think. The email for the show is bigbandology@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your stories, ideas, and experiences with building your own group. All right, cue the traveling music. I hope you enjoyed hearing from bassist, composer, arranger, and bandleader Kris Berg. You can find out more about him at www.krisbergjazz.com. Make sure you also check out his compositions through Alfred Publications, through J.W. Pepper, as well as his own website. The show is sponsored by the Sketch Anderson Orchestra, Cleveland's best live Monday night big band. Check them out on their website at www.saorchestra.com, on Facebook at SA Orchestra, on Twitter at SAO Jazz, and on Instagram and Patreon at SAO Big Band. By BAC, the Best American Craftsmen, makers of my custom bass trombone and Model 4 tenor trombone. BAC, get in the loop. Next week we go in a new direction. You want to know what that is? So do I, so tune in and find out. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Eric Dragney. Until then, please be safe and supportive to each other. And as always, keep swinging.